Today, many students go to college with numerous questions about their faith, yearning to know if the seed planted in them as a child is both true and practical. Using the miracle on the road to Emmaus as a model, young adult ministers conversed weekly for 3 months with college students about the most pressing questions they had about the Catholic faith. As they journeyed together virtually, something amazing happened. Doubts disappeared, fears faded, and Jesus revealed that He is still alive. Hearts Burning Within Us, the latest book from Patchwork Heart Ministry, is a result of that grace-infused conversation. It is the perfect back-to-school gift for recent high school graduates and current college students. Get your copy for them today at patchworkheart.org or by calling 424-704-3278. That's 424-704-3278.
Patchwork Heart Ministry is committed to sowing hope into broken hearts by helping young people encounter the love of Jesus Christ and His Catholic Church through prayer, storytelling, and media initiatives. We invite you to prayerfully consider supporting this mission financially. Mail your tax-deductible donation to Patchwork Heart Ministry at P.O. Box 563, Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, zip code 53147. Or visit patchworkheart.org to donate online. That's Patchwork Heart Ministry, P.O. Box 563, Lake Geneva, Wisconsin 53147, or online at patchworkheart.org.
Welcome to the Sowing Hope podcast. This is a show all about implanting hope in our hearts. I'm Bill Snyder, joined by my friend Ann DeSantis. We're glad you're here for our uplifting conversation about faith and how it sustains our hearts through all the seasons of life. Thanks for walking with us.
Hello and welcome to the Sowing Hope podcast. This is Ann DeSantis with you. Unfortunately, my co-host Bill Snyder is not able to join us on this evening, but we do have an amazing guest here on the Sowing Hope podcast. We have Erin Cupp, and she is a wife, mother, and also a lay Dominican. I'm going to read her bio on about the author. Lives with her family of vertebrae somewhere out in the middle of nowhere, Pennsylvania. When Erin is not writing, cooking, or parenting, she can be found reading, dancing English country, and dragging loved ones to visitor centers at tourist spots around the country. And then we can get to know her at her own website, which is erinmccollcup.com. Welcome, Erin. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Ann. Thanks for having me on today.
Yes, it's an honor to have you here because I know we've been communicating for some months now, and here the day is finally here. We have the podcast. We could learn more about you and your writing with our Sunday visitor. It's OSV. If anyone wants to check that out, the name of her book is called All Things New: Breaking the Cycle and Raising a Joyful Family. And I thought I could also read from your website that you are a writer, a speaker, and a believer that mental health and spiritual health are key in breaking cycles of bondage to destructive patterns in our relationships, especially in our relationship with ourselves. I think that's very important. And I know we're going to unpack all of that during this podcast. Why don't we just start with you? Now, you're a native of where I'm from. We're both from the greater Philadelphia area.
That's right. 5-county area.
That's right. Not too far away from one another. So let's just start with you, your early life, and anything you want to share about how you became a writer.
Oh, sure. Well, let's see. I grew up in a family that was Catholic. I did go to Catholic schools, but it was very much, I went to Catholic schools through 12th grade. Graduated Lansdale Catholic, go Crusaders. And but the experience of my faith was very much something that was in the classroom or in church, and not really so much lived out through relationship. My family was active in scouting in different ways, so there was service to others involved, but really when it came down to relationships, service to each other wasn't really it wasn't a source of connection in our family. So that made the lived experience of my faith very difficult. I've heard it said from several sources that our image of God tends to be formed by the picture that is created by our earthly parents. And my relationship with my earthly parents has always been very strained, very difficult. I attribute that with as much empathy as I can through my own wounds to their wounds. We all make choices often enough out of our hurts rather than out of trust in God. It's a very human thing to do. And so unfortunately that shaped my image of God as this sort of distant person who I needed to work really hard not to get screamed at. And so by the time I was, I'm going to say in high school, early high school, I was an atheist. By the end of high school, I was sort of this spiritual but not religious agnostic. Like there's something out there. I don't know what it is, but it's out there and it's not with me. So I'm just gonna go with doing what I want. The funny thing is, you did ask, how I became a writer. In 8th grade at my grade school, everybody had to write a term paper. And since it was the 80s, here I am dating myself, the term paper topic that I chose was missing children. And I don't quite know why I picked it other than it was sort of like a hot topic. I remember there was like this one HBO series that I watched kind of obsessively about, children that were missing and how they went missing, sort of like, all the true crime documentaries that people watch now. And I would really watch that very obsessively. And so I did my term paper on missing children. And I remember reading, doing my research and reading about the symptoms that children had, those few who were thankfully recovered and returned home. They had all of these symptoms and behavioral symptoms that they brought home with them. So they didn't like being touched. They were afraid of loud noises. They isolated. They lied easily. And I remember being in 8th grade and thinking, well, this sounds like me. This is kind of weird. So I'd like to think that the start of my journey of recovering from family abuse and dysfunction started in 8th grade. It started with reading that paper and thinking, why am I seeing myself in all of these symptoms from these children? I've never been kidnapped. I don't have trauma. What's going on? So that was, with me. That's always been with me, really. And then by the time I got to college, I was a theater major. I was in plays in high school and grade school when we had them. And so I went to college, I was a theater major, and, I was constantly being in all these, different roles, different people, different performances, kind of running from myself. And wouldn't you know it, the second semester of my freshman year of college, I get cast as a child abuse survivor. And I remember the first night we blocked the scene that I was in, where that information was kind of revealed. And blocking is where people are like you're told where to stand and where to sit and when to move. So the first night we blocked that scene, I basically had a nervous breakdown in front of the whole cast of my peers, which was humiliating. But I remember I went home. I went back to my dorm room that night, and I was just kind of staring off into a wall, into space, at a wall, at my, quilt, whatever, and just thinking that my reaction to that script and that scene, there was something wrong. I didn't know what it was. And at the time, like I said, I was agnostic, but not really. I was actually going to mass, but that was more out of superstition than anything else. Because if there was a God, I didn't want to be ticking him off any more than I already had. So, I was still going to mass, but not really having any kind of spiritual life. And that night, and was in that sort of trance, I remember saying, "Okay, God, or whatever you are, I want to know the truth. Whatever that truth is, I want to know what it is, and I'll do anything to get it, because I know what I have is so terrifying and so unstable that the truth will be stable, and I want that." And I don't know how many converts and reverts you've talked to over the years, but the one thing that I have noticed is that everybody who says to God, "I want the truth," you end up Catholic. It's almost hilarious. That's where we end up. So it took me about a year of praying and searching. At the time, I just kind of thought that I was going to be Buddhist or Wiccan, which is basically witchcraft. Because at the time I was reading palms and tarot cards. I had a connection to the occult, unfortunately. And the more I explored and prayed, the more Christianity just made sense. And I remember praying to God, like, "Okay, I'll be Christian, that's fine, because that's the truth. But whatever you do, don't make me Catholic, because nobody likes Catholics. I don't even like Catholics." So here I am, 20 some years later, Catholic and loving it, and I wouldn't have it any other way. So that's my journey of how I came from, this very painful experience in childhood, through childhood, to the faith and to writing about it.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing a little bit of your journey. And I know we have a lot more to talk about. Your book is wonderful. I have the book itself, and I do book reviews for a lot of the different publishing companies. And so it was a real blessing to be able to receive your book. And the subtitle is Breaking the Cycle and Raising a Joyful Family. So I think that's an amazing piece of who you are as well, that although you had a challenging and difficult journey at the beginning of your life, and you were on that pathway to finding the truth, is that your book, really the end result is that raising a joyful family. Tell us a little bit more about that, because you are a mom too. You're balancing so much. And what is your life now like right now with raising kids?
Well, the thing that I like about that title, Raising a Joyful Family, is it's not raising a perfect family. It's not even raising a happy family, because happiness itself can be idolized. This experience of earthly pleasures, and I include in that title, Earthly Pleasures, the feeling of being approved of by our spouses and even by our children, because that's something that has led me to make a lot of parenting mistakes. Is I was afraid of my own children's reactions and was not there for them, whether it was through dissociating, when they were needy, in need, legitimate need, or through, trying to overpower them with my anger when they were behaving in a way I didn't want. So that's one of the things I put in the book, and that I say whenever I have the opportunity: do not look to me for an example of perfect parenting, because if you do, you will be severely disappointed. I am nobody's perfect parent. I make mistakes. I'd love to say daily, but really it's hourly. I make lots of mistakes all the time. And what writing this book taught me is that in order to have joy, what we really need to have is repentance. We need to be willing to surrender what we were doing and embrace what God wants us to do, even if it's incredibly painful in the moment. One of the lessons that I've learned in my trauma recovery journey is the power of this image of God as the God of colic. I know, I was just speaking a few moments ago about how my image of God was of this, distant guy who was looking for opportunities to be angry with me. And what I have discovered in trying to recover from avoiding God's anger and instead embracing a relationship with God is not like that at all. Our feelings, our pain, our emotions don't inconvenience him in the least. They are his gift to us to help us make sense of our world around us so that we can interact and connect and discover places where we are safe, where we can see his face and feel his love inside our heart and our relationships. So I liken that to the relationship I'm building with God now is I'm building a relationship not with an angry God, but with the God of colic. Anybody who's had colicky babies, and I have had three, two of them at once because I have my first set were twins, knows that the baby is crying, babies, whatever you've got there, and the baby is crying inconsolably. It doesn't last forever, but it lasts a long time. And I wish I had known this when I had colicky babies, that that's actually an opportunity for the parent to show the face of God's love to that child in pain and discomfort. Not your crying is bothering me, I got to find a way to turn it off, but I am here for you. Your pain does not bother me. You can be feeling whatever you're feeling in this moment, and I am here for you. So much of my life before trauma recovery was about trying to exchange emotions, trying to get rid of the pain that I was having, whether it was from, finding out that something I had done disappointed somebody I love, to my
Yes. Wow. Thank you for sharing on all of this, all of these points, because I think what you have done is you have taken the pain of your life and you have turned it around by trusting God, by listening, right? You're listening to his voice in all that you do. And you have turned it around also by the reflections, because when you're a writer, you also know how to reflect, and you learn how to listen to his voice. Now there's a lot of balancing going on there too, I'm sure, a lot of balancing with the kids and with everything. So I just want to thank you so much for everything that you do. So why don't we turn a little bit to the book itself, and how did the idea come, and what was it like for you to write this book?
well, it's funny because I do think that this book is definitely the fruit of Eucharistic adoration. A few years ago, my parish, I'm blessed to have a parish with a perpetual adoration chapel, and they were looking to add more adorers to the schedule. So my kids were old enough and the schedule was kind of in a place I'm like, I could probably add an hour a week. And so I started going, and during my time, my holy hour once a week, eventually I got this idea. I'm like, someday I was writing fiction at the time, and I just kind of like, someday it would be probably helpful to write about the things that I've learned in trying to parent differently than I was parented myself. So I just kind of wrote some notes, jotted down like a brief outline, in my prayer journal, put it away. And wouldn't you know it, a few weeks or months later, briefly thereafter, a colleague at OSV emailed me and said, "Hey, do you have any ideas for nonfiction right now? I know you usually write fiction." I'm like, well, funny enough, great timing that you would ask now, because I have some ideas, and here's my favorite, and it was this book. And so yeah, that's where that started. What was it like writing this book? When I started writing it, I knew I was going to learn something, because every writing project I have ever had in my life, God has always used to teach me something big, including that 8th grade term paper of all things. So as I was working on this, I knew that I had a lot to learn. But as I'm gathering the information, the research information for each chapter, I'm like, oh, wow, look at this thing I've been doing that's destructive. Oh, wow, look at this thing that I've been doing that's ruining my relationship with my kids. Ooh, oh, wow. Okay. So this book has been very instrumental in teaching me, helping me see how far I had come before I started writing it, but also how far I still had to go, and how far I still have to go today from where I'm at. That's why it's so important for me to, make sure people know that don't look to me for some great parenting example. In fact, I dedicate the book to my children, saying that they will gleefully tell you how often I fail to take my own advice because it's true. I mean, they're not stupid. They know when I make mistakes, and they'll tell you too.
Yeah, kids are great that way, because I think no matter how old they are, uh, the openness that most kids have with their parents in at least being able to tell the truth, right? So you know that when your child tells you something, I think, depending on the relationship that you have, of course, you know that you won't be getting something that's an out and out lie. And but of course all situations are different there, but I know with my own kids, sometimes they're painfully honest with me.
Yeah, and well, actually, and that when my kids are painfully honest with me, which is happening more and more, I don't know if that's how much of that is because they're maturing, and how much of that is because I am maturing
Hmm.
in my own, accountability. That if they are painfully honest, that's a gift. It's because they want us to become safe people to
Mm.
connect with. And it just, when my kids tell me things in the moment that hurt and for which I have to apologize, like in the moment, I'm not going to lie, it's pretty triggering. I'm really upset. My body gets all tense. I'm, re-experiencing the rejection I felt from my parents so often.
Mhm.
But it's, I just, after in the moments afterwards, I tend to reflect and think, wow, okay, this is actually a tool that they are handing me, saying, hey, can you be a safer person for me? And what a loss it is for the parents who rebel at that and say, no, I don't want to be safe for my child. I want to be right. I would rather be wrong and be a more loving parent than I was yesterday than to always be right in my own mind, because more families have been broken by that, I think, than by anything.
Yeah, poor communication is, I think, one of the roots. And of course, there's always spiritual connections in everything that we do and all the facets of our relationships. Turning to the book again, I noticed that you started out with those two great commandments, and then you go into the Beatitudes, which is beautiful. So, how did these ideas come to you? Because I love the Beatitudes, and of course, the two great commandments. There's nothing more important than those.
Right. I think how those came to me as sort of the structure, the framework for the lessons that are available in this book, are that so many of us, myself included, come to parenting with this list of, well, I know what not to do. Like, I basically kind of, approached parenting with this list of, okay, these are the ways that my parents made choices that have caused me pain and still cause me pain. So I won't do those things. But what was missing was what to do, the positive choices to make, the ways to connect. And so, just like the 10 commandments are the thou shalt nots overwhelmingly, obviously, um, the greatest commandment, the love God and love your neighbor as yourself, and the Beatitudes, especially the Beatitudes, since they are, the Beatitudes were delivered up from a mountain. They're the Sermon on the Mount. They're the start of the Sermon on the Mount. And just like Moses went up and got the law, Jesus went up the mountain and gave the law and showed the law himself. And so the Beatitudes are sort of like the aspect of the new covenant of here's what to do, which is what those of us who come from parenting abuse and dysfunction, when we are, coming to be parents ourselves, we also need what to do. We need the positive. We need the Beatitudes. We need God's love. We need to love God, and we need to love our neighbor as ourselves. And that as ourselves piece is so huge because it's not something often enough that we were taught by parents who were wrongly spirited themselves.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's a great topic because you don't hear many writers or speakers talk much about poor parenting and the effects of that on an adult, and then ways to move on from that like you do. I don't think I've heard that before. So especially in Catholic circles, talk a lot about being a good parent and all the things you need to do to be a good Catholic parent, but not so much about dealing with what happened to you in your trauma and in your past. I mean, I think there's a lot in the charismatic renewal with There's a book called Unbound. I think you know about that book too. And the whole idea of like being able to renounce the vice and the things that have happened to us, to be able to call on the Holy Spirit and be healed, right? And that whole idea of, well, what is healed? And I don't know if you agree with this, but I think part of healing is also that we come to that realization that we are in a sinful world and things do happen. And unfortunately, there is sin. And I think, well, it's almost an acceptance of what has happened to us in the past and being able to still step forward in a good way, in a correct way with God, to move on in faith and not lose your faith over it. Because God doesn't take that magic wand and fix everything all the time, right?
He can.
Yes.
He rarely does.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not because he's mean. It's not because he's trying to torture us. For a very long time, I thought it was because he was mean and holding out on me. And you mentioned that charismatic renewal. When I was talking about my conversion experience in college, I was very involved in, after I decided to throw my hat in with Catholicism, I was very involved in charismatic prayer and was utterly baffled as to why I wasn't getting healed. And now I see it's because God needed me, not needed, God needs nothing from me. God wanted me to experience his love as being not turning off my emotions, not shutting me up, but instead to experience, he wanted me to experience, wants me today to experience his love as accepting and embracing and holding and not being overpowered by, my pain. And that's why I know I heard you say that, not many people are writing about this in Catholic circles. It's funny, I have several writer friends, some of whom have experienced similar upbringings, obviously not exactly the same. And all of them were like, wait, you're writing about this while your parents are still alive?
Yeah.
you
Mm-hmm.
know um so it's a scary thing because and I actually address this in the book, there's a lot of pressure that to sort of misinterpret honor your father and mother.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
That if you are speaking up about sin in your family of origin, that the one who is speaking out against that sin is in fact sinning in telling that truth. And I make the case that that's not the case, that God wants us to have a hunger and thirst for righteousness, which means we need to have this sensitivity of conscience that tells us when we are doing wrong, and so that we can repent. But if we only turn that to ourselves and don't recognize that others are also doing wrong and reject not the people but the sin and the patterns, then we put ourselves at a disadvantage. We are, in fact, in a way, hiding in the garden with Adam and Eve, trying to cover up what God did not design to stay covered.
Good way to put it. I never
That
heard it
makes sense.
said that way. And can I say also, I agree with you that the fact that your parents are alive and you're writing about this, you haven't said anything terrible about your family or your parents. I mean, I don't think, but it's an awareness that we all have. I think it's a maturity that it takes to say, you know what, I wasn't raised perfectly, right? And some of it wasn't just quote me. Does that make sense? It wasn't just me, it was the circumstance, because sin does exist. Let's face it. Even in the most perfect families that we see on social media, when we scroll and go through and look at the big, beautiful families that are there, right? And think, oh, they're probably perfect. But even those families have something, right? There's something going on that we might not know about. So I just think it's a beautiful thing. And I'm glad that you and I think we come to agreement that, yeah, that healing doesn't mean things are going to be perfect. It really doesn't. And I think your book also talks about that too, because the way that we become perfect, especially that you turn to the Beatitudes, in my opinion, is that you are pointing people not to fix their lives, but to go ahead and find the people who, to try to make the most of the rest of your life by loving God and serving God. And I just want to interject for a second because I think our two pathways are crossed, because I also just wrote a book, a shorter book. It's called Love and Care for the Marginalized. And there's a crossing there, because my book focuses on who are those people. They're not just the homeless and the poor, which of course we always want to have a heart for them and care about them. But the marginalized people are really everywhere in our lives. They're everywhere. They're in our neighborhoods, our churches, our families, our extended families. They're everywhere. And so I just commend you for that recognition of how you've used these Beatitudes, because, they're an important message from Christ. We can't ignore them.
Mm-mm.
We can't ignore what God is speaking to us. Now, I also love, can I tell people in your book that you do the chapter, which is the actual meat of the chapters, but then at the end you have workshop and some prayer and also saint inspiration. Let's talk about those things. So how did you come up with this idea that you did the chapter, which is a typical, way that you present, but then at the end you have these special little sections too?
Sure. Well, I definitely wanted to lead the readers into prayer, because that is the place where I want to say we meet God, where God meets us, where we have that opportunity for that veil to be lifted. And in the moment of prayer, it's kind of funny. I think I really came to full realization of this after the book came out, of how much of my prayer life I have spent dissociated. For those who don't know, dissociation is sort of when your brain sort of escapes reality and starts thinking about anything that's not in front of you. So for instance, for years and years and years, as a lay Dominican, I'm praying the Liturgy of the Hours. I'm praying, I'm doing Lectio Divina, I'm doing the Rosary. And for most of that time, I was not actually praying. I was using that time to okay, here are all my problems, and here's how I'm going to fix them. And here's how mad I am at God for not fixing them for me. So now I have to do it. And that's really just a form of dissociation. I was just overthinking all of my problems instead of actually becoming present to God in prayer, and just letting God do what God does, which is lead us to Him. So I'm glad I ended up putting prayer in each chapter, because that's the opportunity where we, let our hearts, we can choose to let our hearts be opened up so that God can kind of get in there and tinker, and do what He knows is best for us. We might have this list of things we want Him to do for us to make us feel better right away, but that's not His way. His way is to lead us to Him, not to fix us so much. Because this, like you were talking about, this world is this is a sinful world. I think one of the lies that sin tells us is that we could ever be satisfied here. We were designed to be satisfied by this world. My argument is that everybody is traumatized. I mean, I've got a lot of people reading this book and saying, well, I'm not traumatized like you were. And I'm like, yeah, but you were built for paradise and you live here. You live in this fallen world. So in a way, you're traumatized too. Everybody's been traumatized. And prayer gives us that opportunity to walk back into Eden, to face that fiery sword that, the angel uses to keep us at bay, and go back into what God intended for us, which is walking with Him. And then for the Beatitude Basics workshop, those are just little tools at the end of each chapter that you can use to journal and sort of reframe your life in terms of the two greatest commandments and the Beatitudes. So I do encourage a lot of journaling. Journaling is a great place to rework your thoughts, to take some time to yourself with God and reframe the way you have been looking at your world, whether it's whether you need to replace complaint with gratitude, whether you need to replace harshness with self-compassion, whatever it is. It's the Beatitudes Basic Workshop at the end of each chapter is a way to take the focus of each chapter and sort of find some ways that you can actually practice that in your life. And then saint inspiration. See, I love the saints. I know everybody loves the saints, but I really love the saints because, especially as a survivor of family abuse and dysfunction, because I love the Holy Family, but Jesus doesn't know what it's like. I mean, he knows, but he did not have that lived experience that, say, Thomas Aquinas did, where his own mother tried to turn him from his vocation by having his brothers kidnap him, bring him back to the family castle, and lock him in his room with a prostitute. Like, what a betrayal. What a betrayal of truth and the dignity of your own child. Jesus did not experience that because his mom was perfect. But St. Thomas Aquinas did.
Mm-hmm.
And he still came out on the other side, glorifying God with everything he did. Same for St. Zélie Martin. She's in there too. I like to call her ma petite maman, which is French for my little mommy, because I feel like she and I went through so many of the same experiences growing up. She described her own childhood as sad as a burial shroud. Like, because she was raised with harshness and coldness, her mother wouldn't let her have any toys, any dolls. And yet she, St. Zélie, got so close to God that she was able to be this source of compassion and faith and example for all of these children, I believe all of which are at this point somewhere on the road to sainthood. So that's the power of the saint stories, to show us, how repentance can help us step out of those unhealthy patterns that we may have been taught by our own broken families and step into God's grace.
I have to say, I just love what you just said and those endings of each chapter, because like you were discussing, there is that beatitude workshop and then some kind of an act of contrition and a saintspiration, which is just amazing. And I've learned so much just from reading about these saints here. I want to read a little bit of what you have in one of the Beatitude basic workshops, and it's under Blessed are the Peacemakers on transparency. You say, practice listening to conflict, both external and internal, without automatically reaching for the mute button. Ask God to show you what he might want you to learn about his love through the experience of this conflict. If sitting with these big feelings seem unbearable, seek trusted counsel on how to develop this skill. So what you're doing here is you're giving like real life help for people. So I think that's one of the best things I like about the book. I don't know about you. Have you thought about the idea of doing some kind of like, I think you could do some kind of online workshops with your own Zoom meetings and just put it out there to your audience. I think that would be a great idea. I don't know, have you thought about doing anything like that?
It's funny you should bring that up, because I am working right now on something that actually came out of writing the chapter on Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. A lot of childhood trauma survivors turn to addictions to comfort the pain that trauma brought. And I am no exception. So part of writing this book ended up with me working on my addiction to compulsive overeating. I mentioned it in the book that since starting that recovery program, I have lost, at the time of publication, I had lost a lot of weight. As of today, I've lost nearly 100 pounds. So what I'm working on right now is a course that you can study on your own time, called Filled with Good, Theology of the Body for Food Addicts. And it's this walk through how our addiction to various things, but especially the readily available substance of food, how that connects to St. John Paul II's teaching of theology of the body, and how we can use the tools that he has given us, and how the tools that even secular trauma work provides, how those all overlap and intersect in these mind-blowingly amazing ways to help us develop those skills, basically, that we need to withstand all of the brain messages that our pain afflicted brains are sending us, telling us that the only way we can get through this pain is with food, for those of us who are food addicts. And that actually translates also to the next course I'm hoping to do, is how to stop yelling. Because as a parent, I write in the book about how I just thought I was a yeller. I thought that was just part of my, that's just the way I am. I'm a yeller. But the more I study, the more I realize I'm not a yeller. I am reacting to the pain of having been raised by emotionally immature people. And the children, they're supposed to be emotionally immature. So our children are going to trigger us because they often enough act in ways that our parents did to cause us pain. So yeah, I'm working on some courses. I'm really excited about being able to share the tools that my study has given me, that God has given me through my study and through my healing work. And I'm hoping that these courses will be able to give, condense several years of my study and work into, brief pieces that people can use to their own benefit much more quickly than I had to. But yeah, to get to those, I encourage you, go to my website, erinmccollcup.com. What I have on my website is a quiz called "What is your rut busting beatitude?" If you take this quiz, I am going to send you a free chapter of All Things New based specifically on your personal quiz results. So a machine is not picking this right now. I am. I'm going to pick this for you and then send it to you. You'll also get subscribed to my newsletter, and all of my newsletter subscribers will be entered into a lottery. Those who you will have the opportunity to sign up to be entered into a lottery to take these courses for free when they are in beta test version, so that you have the opportunity to be the first to know. So yeah, if those types of learning things are of interest to you, do check out my website. Do check out the what is your rut busting beatitude quiz, and hopefully I can provide you with some resources that will really help you boost your spiritual life and also your relationships with your kids, with your spouse, even with your family of origin.
That is beautiful. Wow. And it's very exciting because
Oh,
it's,
I'm so excited.
yeah,
Every time I'm doing the research, I'm like, oh, look at this new thing. This is so cool.
it's very, I like what you're doing, that it's very proactive. So you didn't just write a book and the book is sitting there for people to read. And once they're done, they put it down and then they pick up another book. It's something that they can really live out. And to me, it's very inviting. You're very inviting in this way, because let's face it, I think you made a good point with food, and that doesn't really matter, honestly, how big or small someone is. You can still abuse food, even if you're not um, obesely overweight or anything like that. People abuse food, even if they are smaller people, I think, because
Yeah.
if they're not eating healthy. And also, I have to congratulate you. That is incredible that you lost 100 pounds. I mean, oh my goodness.
Almost. I got to put that caveat on there. I'm coming up on 110, on
Yeah.
100 pounds.
May I ask, I'm sure you've gotten this question before. May I ask, what was the program? Was it something, I'm sure that you encompass your spirituality into it as well, but did you use a specific program, or was it just being more careful with your habits?
Well, it's definitely, it had to be a holistic approach for me. A lot of spirituality, a lot of therapy. So yeah, I write in the book a lot about my experience of coming to approach food addiction recovery. And also in the back of the book, as well as on my website, I list resources for anybody who is interested in pursuing a more spiritual approach, a combination of both spiritual and mental health approach to tackling whatever your addiction is, whether it is food, in my case, or any number of other things, alcohol, drugs, gambling, because behavior our poor behavior choices can definitely become addictions and, detach us from God's will for us. So yeah, definitely anybody who's interested in more about my journey, I encourage you to check out at least my website and go to the resources tab.
Yeah, awesome. Hey, I'd love to read some of the recommendations that you received. Maybe I won't read every one of them, but at least I want to tell everyone who these people are. And I'd like to read one or two. Is that you have Danielle Bean, who's the brand manager of CatholicMom.com, Gary Zimak, the best-selling author, speaker, and radio host, Lisa Hendy, the author of I'm a Saint in the Making, and Damon and Melanie Owens, co-founders of Joyful Ever After movement for married couples. I must say, you have a great list of recommendations there, and beautiful work. Let's read a couple of them. I'd like to read Danielle Beans is bold, compassionate, refreshing, and insightful. Erin Cupp grapples with stories from her painful past, looking at them now through the eyes of faith as she walks us through the process of doing the same. What a gift to to imperfect families everywhere. And again, Danielle Bean. And let's read also the one from Gary Zimak. Erin Cupp provides a way forward for those wishing to break the cycle of past hurts and raise their children in a positive, loving manner. Well done, Gary Zimak. And coming from Gary Zimak, that's a nice compliment.
It is. I'm so
Yeah.
honored.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
I'm so grateful for the feedback that all of the advanced reviewers offered. It's been very validating and just fills me with gratitude.
Validating is a great word. I like that. And especially with, you were talking about throughout this podcast, your experience with growing up and everything. And I've learned that on my own, in my own faith journey, that validation from God, but in our own hearts and sometimes through other people is a good thing. And so I think that's incredible and wonderful, all the work that you're doing. I love the book cover too. The book cover is a picture of, it looks like a man's hands and then the woman and then the child. And inside the child's hands, all the hands are together, is a heart. Can you tell us a little bit about the book cover?
I just think it's lovely. I'm just a big fan of the Virgin Mary blue that's on the background. Now you all know my favorite color. That was just an accident that the cover artist, chose that color.
Oh.
But I just love the idea of the family, the layers of family that, are that God designed to, cradle our hearts. I mean, I realize it's like a little, piece of ceramic heart or something like that, but like a heart-shaped, piece of art, so to speak. But just the idea that, the smallest hands cradle the fragilest hearts, and that our job as parents is to support that and to be gentle and present like those hands visually are. I think it's lovely.
It really is. And I have to say, I get books all the time from different publishers because I'm also an author with Catholic Mom, as you are. And so I get anywhere between 2 to 5 books a month. But I have to say the cover of your book and your book itself is just really top class. I mean, it's beautiful and you did a wonderful job. So congratulations. And I would just invite our listeners, please do check out her website again at erincupp.com. Now, as we're coming to a close, did you have any final words before we end or call to action? Maybe there's something that you want to tell us what's going on the rest of this year.
Well, again, the thing I'm working on right now is that Filled with Good course. Definitely go to my website, take the What is Your Rut Busting Beatitude quiz. That will get you in touch with me personally and get you on the newsletter so you have a chance to find out about the course before anybody else does. And even if that course is just not your thing, every quarter, every season, basically, I promise not to spam you with my newsletter. I'll be sending out opportunities for connection, and for some encouragement and just tips for, practical living our relationships in a more godly way every day. That's really the heart of what I want to do for the folks who connect with me.
Thank you
visit
so
my
much.
website, take that quiz.
Yes. And I'm excited too, because you're going to be a guest with me in the fall with a foundation that I represent, the St. Raymond Nonnatus Foundation. We're going to have another video interview this time, not an audio. And so we'll be doing more things together. So I will ask everybody to keep an eye on my own platforms, and Bill and I would probably love to have you back again for part 2, maybe part 3, who knows?
That'd be great.
Yeah, exactly. And I would like for you to meet him, of course, since he wasn't able to be here with us this time around. So again, Erin, thank you so much for joining us. And we will see all of you next time here on the Sowing Hope podcast. God bless.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Sowing Hope on Patchwork Heart Radio. For more information about this podcast and our ministries, visit our websites, patchworkheart.org and DeSantis.com. You can also follow and interact with us on Twitter at PWH Ministry or DeSantis2. Did you enjoy this podcast? Listen to other podcasts from Patchwork Heart Ministry by following Patchwork Heart Radio wherever you listen to podcasts.